For most people today, sleep begins in a bed. It feels so normal that almost nobody stops to question it. A mattress, a pillow, a blanket, a frame that lifts the body above the floor, it all feels so obvious. But for almost all of human history, none of it existed. For tens of thousands of years, and in truth, far longer than that, human beings did not climb into beds at night. They did not pull back sheets or lower their heads onto pillows. They did not walk into bedrooms designed only for rest. Instead, when darkness came, they lay down on the earth, on dry grass, on leaves, on animal skins, on woven reeds, on packed soil, sometimes on nothing more than the ground itself. And that raises a strange and quiet question. If human beings lived this way for so long, then why does the bed feel so essential now? Why did our species spend the vast majority of its existence sleeping without one? Tonight, we travel backward into that forgotten world, a world before bedrooms, before furniture, before mattresses, and before the idea that sleep needed a special object at all. Because the truth is this: for roughly 90% of human history, the human body returned each night not to a bed, but to the earth itself. And if that was once normal for nearly everyone who ever lived, then perhaps the modern bed is not the beginning of the story. Perhaps it is only the ending. Long before houses had rooms, before wood was shaped into furniture, and long before mattresses existed, night arrived in a very different world. There was no bed waiting nearby, no raised frame, no soft layered surface prepared in advance, no separate sleeping space at all. Sleep happened wherever the body happened to be when the light faded. That is the part modern life makes easy to forget. For most of human history, the place where people slept was often the same place where they had spent the day. The same ground where they had gathered food, repaired tools, shared stories, watched the horizon, or sat near a small fire, slowly became the place of rest once darkness spread across the land. The surface beneath them might be dry soil, flattened grass, leaves, sand, bark, or bare earth. Sometimes there was a thin layer of plant material or animal skin between the body and the ground. Sometimes there was almost nothing at all. And yet, for thousands upon thousands of generations, this was normal. The human body still needed sleep just as it does now. Muscles grew tired. The brain needed rest. Memory had to be restored. The nervous system had to settle. But the environment surrounding that sleep was completely different. There were no bedrooms separating night from the rest of life. No walls saying, "This is where sleep belongs." There was only the body, the fading light, the cooling air, and the ground beneath it. And for nearly all of our species' history, that was enough. The bed feels ancient only because it is familiar. But in the long story of human life, the earth came first. And for a very, very long time, the earth was home. To understand how humans once slept, it helps to stop imagining the distant past as unusual. For the people living then, it was not strange at all. It was simply life. For roughly 300,000 years, Homo sapiens existed without furniture. And if we look further back to earlier human ancestors, that pattern stretches beyond 2 million years. That means the human body spent almost its entire history resting in a world with no beds, no bedrooms, and no separate sleeping spaces. There was no private room to retreat into at the end of the day, no place designed only for stillness. Night did not begin when someone walked upstairs and turned off a lamp. It began when the sky darkened, temperatures changed, and the world itself shifted into a slower rhythm. The body responded to that rhythm directly. As evening settled, daily activity faded. Movement became quieter. Voices softened. Firelight dimmed. And eventually, people lowered themselves close to the ground and allowed sleep to come. That is important to remember. This was not a temporary stage of human life. It was not a rough beginning that lasted only briefly before real comfort arrived. It was the normal condition of human existence for countless generations. The idea that sleep requires a special object, a bed, is incredibly recent when compared to that timeline. For most people who have ever lived, sleep was not tied to furniture. It was tied to place, to darkness, to the body, to the landscape itself. And in that world, the ground was not seen as primitive. It was familiar, dependable, ordinary. It was simply where night happened. When the time for sleep approached in the prehistoric world, people did not walk toward a bed. They prepared the ground. That preparation was usually simple, quiet, and practical. A patch of earth might be cleared by hand to remove stones, thorns, or insects. Dry grasses could be gathered and spread into a thin layer. In some places, broad leaves or soft stems created a slightly gentler surface. In colder environments, animal skins from earlier hunts might be placed beneath the body to block some of the cold from the soil. None of this created anything like a modern bed. But it did create something important, a sleeping place. That distinction matters. Early humans were not careless about sleep. They did not simply collapse wherever they stood. Again and again, across many generations, people learned how to shape the immediate environment around them in small ways that made rest safer and more comfortable. A little softer, a little warmer, a little cleaner, a little less exposed, and that was often enough. These sleeping places were temporary by nature. They were made for a single night or for a short stay, and then left behind when the group moved on. The next evening, the process would begin again in a different part of the landscape. That repeated rhythm shaped human life for most of our past. Sleep was not something stored in one permanent location. It had to be created each night. And because of that, the human body became familiar with a world where rest did not depend on furniture, but on the ability to turn a small patch of earth into a place where the body could let go. For most of history, that was all a sleeping place really needed to be. For most of human history, people did not stay in one place. They moved. Food changed with the seasons. Animals migrated. Water sources appeared and disappeared. Entire groups had to follow the landscape if they wanted to survive. And that one fact explains a huge part of why beds did not exist. Beds are heavy. Movement is not. A permanent sleeping structure would have made very little sense in a world where people might stay somewhere for only a few nights before moving on again. Carrying furniture through forests, plains, riverbanks, or rocky terrain would have wasted energy that early humans could not afford to lose. So instead, sleep stayed flexible. Every night, the group stopped. Every night, the ground was prepared. Every night, a sleeping place was made from what the environment offered. Then in the morning, it disappeared. That rhythm repeated for thousands of generations. And because it repeated for so long, the human body adapted to it. Sleep happened on firm surfaces more often than soft ones. The spine rested on earth, not on mattresses. Muscles relaxed against the land itself. That does not mean prehistoric sleep was miserable. It means it was normal. The body tends to adapt to what it experiences over and over again. And for nearly all of human history, what it experienced was movement by day and grounded sleep by night. The bed did not fit that world. The ground did. Sleep in the prehistoric world did not always happen in one long, uninterrupted block. It followed the rhythm of the night itself. After sunset, the body would slowly enter its first period of rest. The ground still held warmth from the day. The air cooled gradually. The group settled into stillness. But as the night deepened, things changed. Temperatures dropped. The fire faded into embers. The ground slowly lost its warmth, and the body responded. People shifted position, turned from one side to another, pulled plant layers or skins closer, adjusted without fully waking. Sometimes they even woke briefly, not fully alert, not active, just aware. Then they drifted back into sleep again. This kind of sleep, broken into phases, appears in studies of traditional societies even today. Without artificial light, the night is longer, and the body does not always stay asleep the entire time. Instead, rest unfolds in cycles. Sleep, stillness, brief awareness, sleep again. And when people slept on the ground, surrounded by others, this pattern fit naturally. There was no pressure to sleep perfectly, no expectation of silence, no fixed routine, just the body responding to the slow movement of night. For most of human history, sleep was not controlled. It was experienced. In the prehistoric world, sleep was rarely something you did alone. Without beds separating one person from another, people usually rested close together on the same prepared patch of ground. Bodies formed loose clusters, often near a fire, with very little distance between them. That closeness was not just social, it was survival. The night world was dangerous. Predators moved in darkness. Temperatures could drop quickly. Strange sounds carried across open land. Sleeping near others reduced risk and increased warmth. If one person woke up, others could wake too. In that sense, sleep itself became part of the survival strategy of the group. And over time, the human brain adapted to that environment. It did not require total silence or total isolation to rest. Instead, it learned to fall asleep, surrounded by breathing, shifting bodies, fading voices, and the quiet crackle of nearby fire. For most of our species' history, that was normal. The modern idea that sleep should happen alone, in silence, in a private room, is actually very new. For most humans who ever lived, the night was shared. The warmth was shared. The danger was shared. And the sleep was shared too. Long before beds existed, something else quietly shaped how humans slept. Fire. At some point hundreds of thousands of years ago, early humans learned to control it. And once they did, the night was never the same again. Before fire, darkness meant danger. Visibility dropped. Movement slowed. The world became uncertain. But fire changed that. It created a small center of light in the middle of the night, a place where people could gather, stay warm, and remain aware of their surroundings just a little longer before sleep. And naturally, that is where they rested, not far away, not scattered across the landscape, but close to the fading glow. As the evening passed, people sat near the fire, They talked. They ate. They repaired tools. They watched the flames. And then, slowly, without any clear boundary, that same space became the sleeping place. No transition, no separate room, no moment where bedtime began. Just a gradual shift from activity into stillness. The ground around the fire held warmth even after the flames died down. The soil, the stones, the ash all stored heat from earlier in the evening. Sleeping nearby made the night more comfortable, and more importantly, more safe. Animals avoided fire. Light pushed back the darkness, and the group remained together within a shared circle. So night after night, across generations, a pattern formed. The fire in the center, people around it, and sleep emerging naturally at its edge, not in beds, but in a circle of warmth, light, and quiet human presence. Sleep is one of the hardest things for archaeologists to find. A stone tool can survive for hundreds of thousands of years. Bones may remain buried in the soil, fire leaves ash and charcoal, but sleep leaves almost nothing. Grass rots, leaves disappear, bodies rise in the morning and leave only the faintest trace behind. So, when scientists search for evidence of ancient sleep, they do not usually find dramatic structures. They look for whispers, compressed plant layers, microscopic fragments of grass, ash from nearby fires, repeated patches of occupation on ancient surfaces. One of the most important discoveries comes from a cave in South Africa called Sibidu Cave, where researchers found ancient layers of grasses and leaves that appear to have been arranged intentionally as bedding around 77,000 years ago. Some of the plants may even have helped repel insects. That matters, because it shows that even without beds, early humans were not passive about sleep. They noticed what worked. They chose better materials. They improved the ground beneath them, not with furniture, but with attention. And that is what much of human history looked like. No bed frames, no mattresses, no pillows, just careful, repeated acts of making the earth a little more livable before night arrived. The human body did not evolve in a world of memory foam and spring mattresses. It evolved on the ground. For hundreds of thousands of years, the spine, the hips, the shoulders, and the muscles of the back experienced sleep on firm surfaces. The body had to learn how to rest without sinking deeply into softness, and over time, it did. When a person lies on firm ground, the body makes small adjustments. The shoulders settle, the hips shift, the spine finds balance. Pressure moves across different parts of the body through the night. That process is not unnatural, it is ancient. Even today, people who sleep on thin mats or firm surfaces often adapt surprisingly well when it becomes normal for them. The body is flexible, it learns patterns, it responds to repetition. And for most of human history, the repeated pattern was simple. Walk all day, lie down at night, rest on the earth. That does not mean the ground was always comfortable. It means the body was familiar with it. Modern people often think softness equals natural comfort. But from a historical perspective, softness is the newer experiment. Firmness came first. The earth was the original mattress. And for generation after generation, the human body returned to it every night without question. Not all ground was equal. Early humans learned that quickly. A small difference in terrain could decide whether the night felt calm, cold, wet, or dangerous. So choosing where to sleep became a quiet skill passed through experience. Slightly raised ground was often better because it stayed drier after rain. Open space made it easier to notice approaching animals. Areas with loose stones, thick insects, or hidden moisture were less desirable. People paid attention to the wind, to the slope of the land, to the presence of grass, to signs that animals had passed through recently. That awareness mattered because the landscape itself shaped the quality of sleep. A good sleeping place was not luxurious. It was simply safe enough, dry enough, soft enough, and once a good patch of ground was found, the group could improve it a little. Stones removed, grass flattened, leaves gathered, a thin sleeping layer made from whatever the area could provide. This was not furniture. It was environmental intelligence. The earth remained the base, but humans learned how to choose the best version of it. And over many generations, this quiet skill became part of survival itself. Because in a world without beds, knowing where to lie down mattered more than owning something to lie on. Before beds, there were materials, simple ones: grasses, leaves, animal skins, bark, reeds, dry stems. These were the earliest human bedding, though they were nothing like what we think of today. Their purpose was practical: to soften the ground a little, to block some cold, to create distance from moisture, dirt, and insects. That was enough. At places like Sibudu Cave, archaeologists found evidence that early humans may have chosen specific plants on purpose, not just for comfort, but because some species naturally discouraged insects. That suggests something fascinating. People were already engineering sleep in a prehistoric way, not with design or furniture, but with observation. Certain plants worked better. Certain surfaces felt warmer. Certain materials lasted longer through the night. And once those patterns were noticed, they were repeated. This is how most human innovations begin. Not as inventions in the modern sense, but as small practical improvements made over and over again until they become normal. And for a very long time, these thin, natural layers were enough to support the body through the night. No mattress, no frame, no bedroom, just the earth and whatever the landscape could spare before darkness settled in. For much of human history, there was no roof above where people slept. The sky remained visible. Grasslands, forest clearings, riverbanks, and open plains became the setting for night after night of human rest. In these places, sleep happened beneath stars, beneath clouds, beneath whatever the sky decided to bring. This changed how people experienced the night. There were no walls to block sound, no doors to close, no separation from the environment. The wind could be felt, distant animals could be heard, temperature shifts moved directly across the body. And yet, for countless generations, this was normal. Sleeping under open sky had advantages. It allowed people to see their surroundings. It reduced the feeling of being trapped. Breezes could push away insects. The horizon remained visible even in low light, but it also required awareness. People learned to avoid areas where water collected, to stay away from animal paths, to choose places where visibility and safety balanced each other. The sky itself became part of the sleeping environment. The slow movement of stars, the fading of light, the deepening darkness, all of it shaped how the body entered rest. Sleep was not isolated. It was connected to the world above as much as the ground below. At first, it might seem like the ground would always feel cold, but in many environments, especially dry landscapes, the opposite was often true. During the day, the earth absorbs heat from the sun, and at night, it releases it, slowly, quietly. That means for the first part of the night, the ground beneath the body could actually feel warmer than the air above it. This made sleeping on the earth more comfortable than it might seem from a modern perspective. The body, lying close to that surface, could retain warmth more easily, and when thin layers of plant material or animal skins were added, they helped trap that heat even more. This natural system required no construction, no technology, no design, just the relationship between sunlight, soil, and time. Early humans did not need to understand the science behind it. They only needed to experience it repeatedly to recognize that some surfaces felt better than others after sunset. And over generations, that knowledge became instinctive. The ground was not just a place to lie down. It was part of the system that made sleep possible. A surface that stored the memory of the day and released it slowly into the night. Modern sleep is often imagined as something that should happen in total quiet. But for most of human history, sleep did not sound like silence. It sounded like life continuing at a lower volume. Breathing nearby, someone shifting on the ground, a child making a small sound, embers cracking softly in the dark, wind moving through grass, animals calling somewhere far away. These sounds were not unusual. They were the background of human sleep for thousands of generations. And because of that, the human brain likely adapted to resting within a layer of gentle noise rather than complete silence. That matters, because it means that what many people today call perfect sleep conditions would have felt very unfamiliar to much of human history. No total soundproofing, no isolated room, no complete stillness, just the body learning which sounds mattered and which did not. A distant predator, important. A family member breathing nearby, safe. The fire settling into ash, normal. Sleep in the prehistoric world was not about removing the world. It was about staying relaxed within it. And that may be one reason why human sleep has always remained slightly alert beneath the surface, even in rest. Because for most of our past, night was never completely quiet. When several people sleep close together, something simple but important happens. Heat stays in the group, and in the prehistoric world, that could matter a lot. Once the sun disappeared, temperatures could drop quickly, especially in open landscapes. The body loses warmth slowly through the night, and without thick blankets or insulated houses, early humans had to rely on other methods to stay comfortable. One of the oldest was each other. Sleeping in groups helped create a shared pocket of warmth. Bodies resting close together reduced exposure to cold air and made it easier to maintain stable body temperature through the night. This was especially useful for children, elders, or anyone weaker or more vulnerable. And it happened naturally. No design, no furniture, no special sleeping system, just closeness. This is one of the most overlooked reasons beds were unnecessary for so long. The bed separates. But for most of human history, sleep worked through connection. Connection to the ground, connection to fire, connection to the group. And when all three came together, the body had what it needed to rest. Not perfectly, not luxuriously, but effectively enough to survive another day. Even in sleep, early humans were never completely unaware, not in the way modern sleep often is. When people rest together on the same ground, something subtle happens. Awareness becomes shared. No single person has to stay fully awake all night. Instead, light moments of awareness pass quietly through the group. Someone shifts, someone briefly wakes, someone listens for a second, and then drifts back into sleep. This pattern is sometimes described as a kind of distributed vigilance, not guarding in the strict sense, not standing watch, but never fully disconnected either, because the environment did not allow it. The darkness beyond the fire still held risk. Animals moved silently, sounds travelled far, and so the body learned to rest, without completely letting go. The ground played a role in this too. When everyone slept on the same surface, small movements could be felt or heard more easily. A shift in weight, a sudden motion, a change in breathing. These signals moved through the group. Sleep was shared, and so was awareness. Modern sleep often isolates the individual, but for most of human history, sleep was part of a system where the group itself remained quietly connected through the night. Most of the time, sleeping on the ground worked, but not everywhere. In some regions, the earth created problems. Moisture stayed in the soil after rain. Insects moved through the ground at night. Dense vegetation made certain areas uncomfortable or unsafe. And slowly, in these environments, humans began experimenting with something new. Not beds yet, but small changes. Instead of placing plant material directly on the ground, people sometimes layered it more thickly. In some cases, they placed branches beneath those layers to lift the body just slightly above the soil. Only a few centimeters, but enough to make a difference. Less contact with damp ground. Fewer insects reaching the body. A slightly drier surface to rest on. These were not permanent structures. They were temporary adjustments made for specific conditions. A few branches, some leaves, a loose platform, built quickly, used briefly, left behind. This is how many human innovations begin, not as inventions, but as small solutions to immediate problems. And over time, these small solutions would slowly evolve into something more recognizable. But at this stage, the ground was still the foundation. Humans were not leaving it. They were only beginning to adjust it. For a very long time, the ground was enough. But in certain places, humans slowly began experimenting with something different. Not a bed in the modern sense, just a small separation from the earth. This likely happened first in environments where sleeping directly on the ground caused problems. Wet soil, heavy insects, and thick vegetation made some sleeping surfaces less comfortable and less safe. So people adapted. Instead of placing leaves or grasses directly on the soil, they sometimes laid branches beneath them. A simple crisscross of wood could raise the body slightly above the ground. Not high, not elegant, not permanent, but useful. Even a small lift could reduce moisture, improve airflow, and make it harder for insects to reach the sleeper. That matters because it marks an important shift. For the first time, humans were not only preparing the ground, they were beginning to separate themselves from it. Still, these were not beds yet. They were temporary sleeping. Platforms made from natural materials, built quickly, used briefly, and abandoned when the group moved on. But in that small act, lifting the body even a little, the first real step toward the bed had quietly begun. It is important not to imagine these early raised sleeping surfaces as furniture. They were not crafted objects standing inside a room. They were survival tools. A few branches laid side by side, a woven layer of plant stems, a loose surface just high enough to improve the night. That was all. And even then, these structures were probably rare compared with ordinary ground sleep. In dry, open landscapes, there was often no reason to build anything more complicated. A thin layer of grasses or skins was enough, so these early proto-beds only appeared when the environment demanded them. That is how human innovation usually works. Not through luxury, through necessity. A problem appears, a small solution follows, and if that solution works, it gets repeated. That is likely how the earliest raised sleeping surfaces entered human life, not as comfort objects, but as practical responses to dampness, insects, uneven ground, and difficult terrain. The earth was still the base. Humans had not rejected it. They were simply beginning to negotiate with it. And that is a very different thing. Even after humans discovered that raising the body slightly above the ground could improve sleep in some places, one huge problem remained: mobility. Most human groups still moved too often for anything like a real bed to become normal. A true bed requires stability. It requires staying in one place long enough for it to be worth building, maintaining, and using again and again. But for most of human history, people still lived in motion. They followed animals, they tracked seasonal plants, they moved with water, they adapted to weather and migration. And in that kind of world, permanent sleeping structures made very little sense. You could build a simple, raised surface for one night in a wet forest. You could improvise something temporary from branches, but you would not carry a bed with you across the landscape. It was too heavy, too inefficient, too fixed. That is why even the earliest sleeping platforms did not lead immediately to widespread beds. The larger structure of human life was still incompatible with furniture. Humans were learning how to improve sleep, but they were still living in a world where sleep had to remain flexible. And as long as life remained mobile, the bed could not yet become normal. This is one of the strangest parts of the story. Humans likely understood the value of sleeping above the ground in certain conditions for a very long time. And yet, the bed still took thousands and thousands of years to truly appear. Why? Because invention alone is never enough. An idea can exist, a useful solution can be known, but if the surrounding way of life does not support it, it stays limited. That is exactly what happened here. Raised sleeping surfaces may have existed in simple forms long before civilization, but they stayed rare, temporary, and local because human life itself had not changed enough yet. The real barrier was not imagination, it was lifestyle. As long as people lived in movement, slept in shared outdoor spaces, and built only what could be left behind, the bed had no stable place to belong. And so for an astonishingly long time, the human species stood at the edge of the idea, without fully stepping into it. The concept existed in fragments, but the world was not ready for it. Not yet. For most of human history, the sleeping place disappeared every morning. But eventually, something changed. In different parts of the world, at different times, some human communities began to remain in one place longer than before. Not forever at first, just longer. This shift began when people slowly started relying more on early agriculture, stored food, and repeated use of the same land. Once crops had to be planted, watched, and harvested, movement became less constant, and that changed everything. Because once a group stays in one place, the sleeping place no longer has to vanish every morning. It can remain. For the first time in human history, the place of sleep could begin to become stable. Not just a patch of ground chosen for one night, but the same place, again and again, night after night. This is the moment where the long story of human sleep begins to turn. Because beds do not really begin with comfort. They begin with permanence. And permanence only becomes possible once humans begin to settle. When early villages began to form, humans did not suddenly start sleeping in luxurious beds. But they did gain something that mattered just as much: a stable indoor floor. That may sound simple, but it was revolutionary. For most of human history, sleep had happened outdoors or in temporary shelters. Now, for the first time, many people were resting inside structures that remained in place year after year. Walls changed the night. They blocked wind, reduced exposure to rain, made the sleeping area more predictable, protected bedding materials from being lost or destroyed, and because of that, the ground inside the house became different from the ground outside. It became familiar, a place where mats, skins, and coverings could be used repeatedly instead of being remade from scratch every night. This was not yet the bed, but it was the beginning of a new idea: that sleep could belong to a fixed place. And once that happened, the sleeping environment itself could begin to evolve in ways that had never been possible before.